لا إله إلا الله وله الحمد وهو على ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وقنا عذاب أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وصل اللهم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أمسينا وأمسى الملك لله والحمد لله لا شريك له لا إله إلا هو وإليه المصير أمسينا على فطرة الإسلام وكلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين اللهم ما أمسى بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك فلك الحمد ولك الشكر يا رب لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا ثم أما بعد my dear respected brothers and sisters السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and welcome back to the Friday night lecture. And tonight, inshallah, we will continue what we talked about earlier today in the khutbah, knowing or learning about Islam, about the Shariah. So we mentioned earlier that our scholars divide Islam. Again, this is not about Islam is either Aqidah or Sharia. It is just a way to facilitate and to simplify the study and the understanding and the implementation of Islam. So they said that Islam consists of Aqidah and Sharia. Aqidah means everything we believe in. Sharia means everything we practice. So the belief side of Islam is called Aqidah. The practical side of Islam is called Sharia. When we say the word Islam, we mean both together, Aqidah and Sharia. But when I say Aqidatul Islam, I mean the belief system. When I say Shari'atul Islam, I mean the practical system, which include the 5 pillars of Islam, al-ibadat, al-akhlaq, the moral character, fiqh al-mu'amalat, financial transactions, everything else, everything we do, the law derived from Islam. And we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who initiated a Sharia, so it is divine, it's not a man-made Sharia. And we said also ignoring the Sharia that Allah ordained and looking for something else is a clear deviation from Islam. You know, there are 2 ways in this life. Either we follow the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or we follow our desire. There is nothing else in between. So following our desire and ignoring a Sharia is a clear deviation from Islam. And we said that Sharia is our way of life. It has everything we need to live according to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we talked about the sources of Sharia, Al-Quran, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Hadith or the Sunnah, which is the collection of the sayings, the actions and the approvals of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, أقواله أفعاله وتقريراته عليه الصلاة والسلام. What do we mean by تقريراته, or what do we mean by the approvals of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We know the sayings of the Prophet. We know the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? What do we mean by the approvals? The approvals means when one of or more of the Sahaba say something or do something in front of the Prophet ﷺ or away from him, but somebody report this to him and he keeps silent. It means that the Prophet ﷺ approved what this Sahabi said, or he approved what this Sahabi did. Because if it is wrong, the Prophet ﷺ would never be what? Would never be silent. If it's wrong, the Prophet will correct them. But if you hear the Prophet ﷺ say, let's say after Salman al-Farisi radiyallahu anhu told Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu, إن لربك عليك حق وإن لنفسك عليك حق وإن لأهلك عليك حق فأعط كل ذي حق حقه. Your Lord has rights upon you. Your nafs has rights upon you. Your family has rights upon you. So give to each one of them their rights. This is what Salman told Abu Darda. Abu Darda went to the Prophet ﷺ and he told him, this is what Salman told me. He said what? Sadaqa Salman. Salman said the truth. So whatever Salman said becomes sunnatun taqririyah. It is sunnah that was approved by the Prophet ﷺ. This is just an example for you to understand a sunnah taqririyah, or the approvals of the Prophet ﷺ. And then we talked about al-ijtihad, and this is our topic. Al-ijtihad. Al-ijtihad in Arabic language is taken from badlul juhd, al-juhd, the effort. And this is from the word jihad comes. Okay? Jihad, ijtihad, juhd. So all these words have the same root, which means to exhort your effort, to make an effort. Al-jihad is to make an effort to struggle against the evil, right? Whether this evil is within yourself, so it becomes jihadun nafs. If this evil is in the society, in the community, it becomes what? Al-amru bil-ma'ruf wal-nahyu anil munkar. But if this evil is in the battlefield, you have your enemies coming to fight against you, then this is jihadul adu, or al-qital, fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now here we are talking about al-ijtihad. Al-ijtihad in Islam means the mental and the intellectual effort made by qualified scholars. Those qualified scholars in the fiqh, we call them al-mujtahideen. Okay, al-mujtahideen, which means scholars who are qualified, who have the knowledge, who have the tools to go directly to the text of the Quran and the Sunnah and get al-hukm from there. Okay, so it's the mental and the intellectual effort made by qualified scholars to understand and interpret the Quranic and prophetic texts. So in this definition, it's very clear that al-ijtihad is not accepted from anyone except from the qualified scholars. Al-ulama, ahlul ilm. Who are the qualified scholars? Are those who are accepted by the Muslim ummah. Man talaqathum al-ummatu bil-qabul. Those who are accepted by the mainstream Muslim community and the mainstream Muslim ummah. Why we say this? Because at any time, especially nowadays, anyone can claim to be a scholar. Anyone. I mean, just go seclude yourself in a room and get, 50 or 60 books and start reading and reading and reading and reading by yourself, and then going out and claim to be a scholar. This is not how a scholar is in Islam. A scholar is the one who gets the knowledge from another scholar. And his sheikh or ustad or teacher got the knowledge from another scholar and from another scholar. This is how scholars are made in Islam. It's not about how many books you have read. It's about who are your shuyukh. From where did you get this knowledge? Because the book never gives you the knowledge. The book gives you the information. The knowledge is the information plus the etiquette, al-adab. The book doesn't give you al-adab, doesn't give you the wisdom. The book gives you the information. I'm not asking you not to read. Go ahead and read as many books as you want. But it's not reading the books that makes you what? A scholar. That's why our scholars always say, لا تأخذ القرآن من مصحفي ولا تأخذ العلم من صحفي. Do not learn Al-Quran from somebody who learned it from the Mus'haf. Learn the Quran from someone who learned it from a sheikh. And do not learn the knowledge, don't get the knowledge from somebody who got it from the books. Learn the knowledge from somebody who got it from sheikh. This tradition of being student and learning the knowledge of Islam from shuyukh is very profound, very strong, very solid throughout generation of Muslims. So this is to highlight qualified scholars, those who are accepted by the mainstream of the Muslim Ummah. مَنْ تَلَقَتْهُمُ الْأُمَّةُ بِالْقَبُولِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in this verse that we mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, verse 59. This is a very important verse. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. All you who believed, obey Allah, and obey the messenger and those in authority among you. What do you notice in this verse? The verb أطيعوا was mentioned when Allah was mentioned. أطيعوا الله. And then the verb أطيعوا, obey, was repeated when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the Prophet. But when he mentioned ulil amr, those who have authority among you, he did not mention أطيعوا. He said أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. He didn't say وأطيعوا أولي الأمر منكم. What does this mean? It means that طاعة الله مستقلة is independent by himself. طاعة الرسول مستقلة is independent by himself. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ مبلغ عن الله. He is the one who conveyed on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? But when it comes to طاعة أولي الأمر, طاعة, the obedience to the people who have the authority, it's not مستقلة, it's not independent. It has to be connected to طاعة الرسول and طاعة الله. So there is no طاعة, no obedience to a person of authority if his decision is made disconnected, away from the obedience to the Prophet and the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم, without mentioning وأطيعوا أولي الأمر منكم. Okay, this is number one. Number two, I mentioned earlier that أولي الأمر, those people who have the authority, are two categories of people. أولي الأمر الدنيوي وأولي الأمر الديني. Those who have the political authority. The political authority, president, emir, king, sultan, whatever title this person has. This is one type of authority. The other type of authority is the religious authority. And here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant the scholars. As we obey our leaders, political leaders, as long as they ask us to do what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what pleases the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we also have the obligation to obey our religious leaders. To obey our religious leaders. Whenever they tell us, do this or don't do this. So this is something that we should keep in mind. Should you disagree, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول. And if you disagree, should you disagree on anything, then refer it to Allah and His Messenger. Refer it to Allah, which means go back to the book of Allah, go back to the Quran and see what the Quran is going to tell you about this situation, or go to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and see what the Prophet ﷺ is going to tell you about this situation. If you truly believe in Allah and the last day, this is the best and fairest resolution. So here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala urging us always, whenever we disagree on something, whenever we are confused, whenever we don't know, is to go to our religious authority and consult with them and ask them. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Go and ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. Now, there is something that I would like to mention. We are a community living in this part of this world. And there are issues and things that appear here, that come out here, that didn't exist before. And they don't exist anywhere in the world. What's the best way to seek the consultation and to seek the expertise of scholars? There are things that are general in Islam. They don't change wherever you are in the world. And these are things related to al-wudu and al-salat and, this kind of, zakat and all that stuff. These are standard wherever you go in the world. لا تتغير الفتوى في هذه الحالة. But there are things that are related to the daily lives of the Muslims in that specific locality. So, when there is something like this, don't pick up the phone and ask somebody somewhere else in the Muslim world, in Pakistan or Egypt or Iraq or Palestine or Yemen, and ask them about something that just happened right here in the United States, in San Diego. Because they're not going to give you the right answer. Al-fatwa doesn't depend on the knowledge of Sharia only. Al-fatwa depends on two types of knowledge. علم الشريعة وعلم الواقع. The knowledge of Islam, the knowledge of Sharia, and the knowledge of the reality on the ground. If somebody is not living here, he cannot tell you what to do. He cannot tell you what to do. And I had community members right here in San Diego facing some challenges at work, and they called somebody, an Imam, wallahi, sometimes in Yemen, sometimes in Misr, sometimes in Saudi Arabia, most likely in Iraq, most recently in Iraq, asking them about things that are happening right here. I'm like, what are you expecting him to tell you? He cannot give you this. He is not qualified to give you this fatwa. So what should we do? You have your own scholars here in the United States. Not only, when I say scholars, I don't mean only individual scholars, even though we have many, mashallah. But we have two major fiqh councils. We have the Fiqh Council of North America, المجلس الفقهي لأمريكا الشمالية, and we have AMJA, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, مجمع فقهاء الشريعة. And both of them, they have great scholars and fuqaha who are known, worldwide. And they give fatwa and they study new things that are happening in the community and all that stuff. And I can give you an example. For example, a brother has been looking for a job for a long time. He was jobless for a long time and just surviving of, borrowing from here and applying for financial aid here and all that stuff. Finally, he got hired in a grocery store, in a supermarket, let's say Vaughn's. And part of his job, as a cashier, is to scan a bottle of wine or a piece of pork, something like this. So this brother doesn't know, he is confused. Should he accept this position? Should he reject it? And this brother picks up the phone and calls, a scholar somewhere else in the world, in a place where Muslims live as a majority, where they don't have this problem. This problem doesn't exist there. And asking him, Shaykh, this is what I got. What should I do? What are you expecting him to tell you? The best he can tell you is get rid of it, reject it, and seek something else. Because he doesn't know that the following day, this brother will start begging. Okay? You talk to somebody, to a scholar who is familiar with the daily lives of the Muslim community in North America and the West in general. Once you ask this question, this scholar will ask you this question. Is this a grocery store or a liquor store? If this is a liquor store, no way. You are not allowed to work in a liquor store. But if this is a grocery store, where all groceries and vegetables and food and milk and bread, and there is 1 or 2 aisles of wine, for example. And you tell me that you have been jobless for a long time and this is the only position that you got in a long time and so on, then I tell you, brother, take this position. Try to avoid as much as possible. Talk to your boss if he can help you or she can help you. But in the same time, try to navigate for another position where it is halal 100%. You see? So this is the difference between depending on someone local who understands the reality of the community, he understands the struggle of the members of the community, versus depending on someone else who have no idea about what's going on in the daily lives of the Muslim in this land. So the understanding and implementation of Sharia on our daily lives must be based on the rules and the regulations initiated by scholars from the early generations of Muslims. It doesn't mean that khalas, the early scholars did everything, made the ijtihad, and there is nothing we can do, and just going back to their books, get their fatwa, and that's it. No, this is not what we mean. What we mean here is that the scholars, the Muslim scholars of the early age, of the early generations of Muslims, and when we talk about the early generations of Muslims, because the Prophet ﷺ praised the 3 generations of Muslims, and he said, خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. The best of generations of this ummah is the first generation, the generation that lived with the Prophet ﷺ, which is the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and then those who came after them, at-tabi'een, and those who came after them, tabi'i at-tabi'een. Why? Because the scholars of those generations, they put all the rules and regulations of understanding Al-Quran and the Sunnah. So those who came after them in different centuries and generations, they made ijtihad. The doors of ijtihad never closed. They are always open. Why? Because the daily lives of Muslims all over the world always bring things that didn't happen before. So if we want to really prove that Islam is applicable at all times and everywhere, then we have to give solutions to people all the time. At the end of the day, what is fiqh? What is fiqh? Without going to the complicated definitions of ulum, of al-fuqaha and all that, al-fiqh means to give the solution or answer the questions of Muslims. That's it. Al-fiqh is to answer the questions of Muslims. If there is no answer, it means that Islam is not practical anymore. Islam cannot govern my life anymore. So al-fiqh is to give the solutions to people. People will bring you a situation and you think about it, and you go to the Quran, you go to the Hadith, you go to ijtihad al-ulama, and you make the analogy and all that, and then you come up with something. I like one of the definitions of al-fuqaha when they talked about al-fiqh. They said al-fiqh hiya ar-rukhsatu min al-thiqah. Al-fiqh means you give the permission to someone to do something by a trustworthy person. You know, the permission given to the people by a trustworthy person. أَمَّا التَّشَدُّدُ فَيُحْسِنُهُ جَمِيعُ النَّاسِ. Meaning that whenever somebody comes to you, like the example that we gave about somebody being hired to work at a grocery store, for example, or somebody driving Uber or driving a taxi, for example, and he comes to tell you, Sheikh, sometimes I do give ride to drunk people. I mean, am I allowed to do that? If you tell this person or all these people who come to you with these questions, akhi, to be in the safe side, just, don't do it. To be in the safe side, to be in the al-ahwat. This is not the right way to give the fatwa. You know, these people might come to you once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, but when they see that every time you tell them, Akhi, to be in the safe side, don't do this, they will stop coming to you and they will do whatever they want. Why? Because you have failed to give them solutions. You have failed to give them the answer. And this is al-fiqh. Al-fiqh is to give solutions to people, is to answer the questions of people, to get them out of that confusion and let them do something that you believe, even if it contains a little bit of haram, but the majority of their work is halal. Al-hukmu ala ma ghalab. We'll always look to the majority of the situation, and even if there is a little bit of haram. Brothers and sisters, let me tell you this. We are living at a time where it's almost impossible to find something 100% halal. Almost impossible. The best example, all of us, we work. All of us, we earn money. Where do you put your money? In a bank. How do these banks work? With a riba. They are all based on a riba. So what are you going to do? All of us, we travel. We book hotel rooms. We rent cars. You cannot do this without credit card. The contract of the credit card itself, it is haram. The contract, it is haram. But the scholars, because of the necessity, the scholars made it halal as long as we pay the loan on or before the due date. You see? So there is no way nowadays to live a life far away 100% from al-haram. So what's the solution? The solution is going back to the rule. Al-hukmu ala ma ghalab. The rule should be given based on the majority of the situation. If the majority is halal, and within this halal there is a little bit of haram, go ahead, akhi. Okay? So this is something that always we should keep in mind. The first 3 generations, which will lead us to talk about the different schools of fiqh or thought. So, al-fiqh is very important in the lives of Muslims. We deal with issues of fiqh every single day. Every single day. You know, and we need always to seek help, seek assistance. Give me an answer. Answer my question. What should I do? Should I move forward? Should I reject? Should I accept? Etc., etc. So, al-fiqh is very important in the lives of Muslims. Now, how did this fiqh start? Let's go to the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was alive, he was the source number 1. Either himself, he can answer the question, or he can wait for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reveal to him questions, the answers. That's why you find in the Quran a lot, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ. They ask you, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ. Why? Because people were coming to the Prophet ﷺ and asking him. The Prophet ﷺ didn't have the answer all the time. Sometimes when he had the answer, he answered them. And sometimes he asked them to wait until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send down the answer. But the Prophet ﷺ was the source of fiqh, the source of legislation during his time. He was the authority based on the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was the reference. He was the reference. Even when the Sahaba, whenever they are away from the Prophet ﷺ and do something, but they are not sure whether what they have done is right or not, they used to come and report this to the Prophet ﷺ. And I give you an example. 2 of the Sahaba were traveling on the road. And the time of Salat came. They didn't have water to make wudu. So both of them, they made tayammum and prayed together. They made tayammum and prayed together. After the salah, they walked a little bit. It was still the time of that salat, like let's say for example Salat al-Dhuhr. They prayed Salat al-Dhuhr at the beginning of the time, and then they walked. Before Salat al-Asr, they found water. They were walking and they found water. So one of them said, oh, there is water. And we are still in the time of dhuhr. So he made wudu and he prayed dhuhr again. The other one said, since when I prayed dhuhr, I didn't have water and I made tayammum, I'm not going to make wudu and pray again because I already prayed. They didn't fight. They didn't start accusing each other that you are against the sunnah, you are this, you are that, don't talk to me, khalas. No. Khalas. One of them made wudu and prayed. The other one said, I already prayed, I'm not going to pray again. And they continued their way to the Medina. When they arrived to Al-Medina, they went to the Prophet ﷺ and they asked him, Ya Rasulullah, this is what happened to us. He looked to the one who did not pray, who did not make wudu and pray again. He told him, لَقَدْ أَصَبْتَ السُّنَّةِ. What you have done is the sunnah. And he turned to the other one, the one who made wudu and prayed again. He told him, زَادَكَ اللَّهُ حِرْصًا. May Allah make you strong in your religion, in practicing your religion. MashaAllah. Did any one of them do anything wrong? Did he blame any one of them? No, he did not. Both of them were right. And this is something I want you to keep in mind also. When it comes to the fiqh issues, the right, as-sawab, can be multiplied. Meaning that all of us, we do things different, but all of us, we are right. None of us is wrong. The issues of fiqh are not issues of haqq and batil. No. The foundations of Islam, al-aqidah is about haqq and batil. But fiqh is about correct or not correct. You see? And sometimes we might do things different, but we are all right. Why? Because Islam or the fiqh can accept all of these practices. All of these practices. Like when we stand in the prayer, some of them we make qabd on our chest like this, right? Some of them make qabd on our stomach. Some of them a little bit lower. And some of us pray without qabd. Who is right and who is wrong here? Yalla. Who is right and who is wrong? All of them right. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he prayed in all these positions. You know that in the Maliki madhab, the authentic opinion in the Maliki madhab is as-sadl, not al-qabd. As-sadl. Al-Malikiyah, the followers of al-madhab al-Maliki, the vast majority of them make as-sadl. Why? Because this is the strongest opinion in the Maliki madhab. If you ask me from where did he get it, Imam Malik? He got it from amalu ahli al-Madinah. It was the practice of the people of al-Madinah. Al-Imam Malik is known to be Imam Dar al-Hijrah. What is Dar al-Hijrah? Al-Madinah al-Munawwarah. He was the Imam and the Faqih of al-Madinah, and one of the sources of his fiqh was Amalu Ahl al-Madinah, the practice of the people of al-Madinah. The people of al-Madinah at that time were at-Tabi'een and Tabi'i at-Tabi'een. They were the children and the grandchildren of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. And the Sahaba, their practice is based on the practice of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Until just recently, few centuries ago, the people of Al-Hijaz and the people of Al-Madinah, they used to pray bis-sadl. Until Al-Madhab al-Hanbali, the Hanbali madhab took over, then people started doing al-qabd. This is just for your information. So at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Rasulullah was the source of fiqh, the revelation was the source of fiqh, and the Prophet ﷺ was the reference. After the death of the Prophet ﷺ, many of the Sahaba scattered all over the world. Not all of the Sahaba stayed in Medina and Mecca. No. Some of them stayed in Medina, some of them went back to Mecca, but others went to Al-Iraq, to Sham, to Egypt, to Persia, to wherever, Central Asia, North Africa. There are some Sahaba who died in North Africa. You see, Uqba ibn Nafi' radiallahu anhu, and many other Sahaba. So the Sahaba went all over the world. And not all of them, they had the knowledge of all the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of them carried some of the ahadith that others didn't. So wherever they went, they started giving fatwa based on the ahadith that they have, based on the knowledge that they have. This is where the different opinions of fiqh started going, or showing up in the lives of Muslims over there. So the new reality with expanding out of Arabia, and then in the absence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were some fuqaha amongst the Sahaba. And I think I mentioned earlier or last week that not all of the Sahaba were fuqaha. Not all of them were fuqaha. Actually, the fuqaha of the Sahaba were three levels, three categories. Al-Mukthirun, the highest of fuqaha amongst the Sahaba, and Al-Mutawassitun in the middle, and Al-Muqillun. Al-Mukthirun amongst Sahaba are very few, like Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu, Aisha, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and Zayd ibn Thabit. About 6 or 7 of them. Those were the scholars among the Sahaba. Under them come another category: Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Salama, Uthman ibn Affan, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, wa Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, Jabir ibn Abdullah. Those were in the middle. And al-Muqillun min al-Sahaba fi al-ilm, like Abu Darda, Abu Ubaid ibn al-Jarrah, An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, Abu Talha, Safiya, Hafsa, Habiba, and few others. So the vast majority of the Sahaba didn't have, Khalid ibn Walid was not Sahabi, was not alim, was not a scholar amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Abu Ubaid ibn al-Jarrah, many of the great warriors, they were not ulama, they were not fuqaha. So what happened during the time of al-Khulafa al-Rashidin, whenever there is something new, Al-Khalifa used to bring those fuqaha amongst the Sahaba and make consultation, shura with them, and ask them to come up with a solution. And this is where the consensus, al-ijma' started. Ijma' al-Sahaba, which means that some of the Sahaba made a fatwa and the rest of the Sahaba did not object. Since they did not object, then it is considered what? Ijma', a consensus. And this happened at the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. When the Prophet ﷺ died, a lot of Muslims in Arabia refused to pay zakah. You know this, right? And the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu considered them as murtaddeen, committing apostasy. And he decided to fight against them. Some of the Sahaba objected. They told him, Ya Khalifata Rasulillah, you cannot do this. You cannot take this risk. Then a consultation, mashura, took place for several days until Abu Bakr radiallahu anhum convinced all of them that this is the way they should go. Otherwise, Islam is gone. If he allows people to go away and refuse to pay zakah, then Islam is gone. And he said his famous saying, والله لو منعوني عقالا كانوا يؤدونها إلى رسول الله لقاتلتهم عليها. If they refuse to give me a rope that they used to give to the Prophet ﷺ, I will fight them, or I will fight against them because of that. You see? When it comes also to the collection of the Quran, when 70 of Huffaz al-Quran among the Sahaba were killed in the battle of al-Yamama, 70 of them, Umar radiallahu anhu came to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and he told him, Ya Khalifa, you have to do something. The Quran is scattered all over al-Medina, in the houses of al-Medina. My suggestion is to collect all the pieces where the Quran is written. And Abu Bakr told him, Ya Umar, I cannot do this. Why? Because the Prophet didn't do it and he didn't ask us to do it. I'm afraid that I'm going to do bid'ah if I do this. But Umar radiallahu anhu insisted on him. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, Umar kept insisting on me until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened my heart and mind, and I did it. Subhanallah. This is how al-fatwa and al-fiqh was developed during the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wa ardahum. At that time, some of the schools of fiqh started appearing, and especially from three pillars of al-fiqh amongst Sahaba, three pillars. Aisha al-Mu'mineen radiyallahu anha was one of the most knowledgeable people at that time. And then Abdullah ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Abbas. And especially Abdullah ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Abbas. And our scholars always, when they go back to both of them, they say, Shada'id ibn Umar wa Rukhas ibn Abbas. Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar was known to be tough. Always choose the tough answer for the questions. And Abdullah ibn Abbas used to be the easiest one going. So Rukhas ibn Abbas wa Shada'id ibn Umar. Now when you look at al-fiqh, you see that some fatawa are a little bit tough, right? Okay, and some fatawa are easy. All these go back to Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma. By the way, they knew this about each other. Abdullah ibn Umar knew that Abdullah ibn Abbas in Mecca was easygoing in al-fatwa. And Abdullah ibn Abbas in Mecca knew that Abdullah ibn Umar in al-Medina was tough going in al-fatwa. But they have never criticized each other. They have never said anything ill, wrong about each other. They were always respectful. Why? Because they had husnul dhan and niyya sadiqah. Abdullah ibn Abbas was easy because, you know, he knows what he is doing. He's not making things easy for the sake of make it easy. But this is his understanding to the Quran and the Sunnah. And also Abdullah ibn Umar made things tough, not because he enjoyed making things tough on people, but this is his understanding, you know. And even nowadays, even in our fuqaha now, subhanallah, I have witnessed this with so many fuqaha here in the United States. I remember in one of the conferences of Amja, somebody came and asked one of the scholars about the student loan. He told him, Sheikh, you know, I have students coming to me in the masjid and asking me about the student's loan. Is it permissible for them to get the student's loan or not? You know what he told him? He told him, listen, I have my own fatwa on this issue, but it's a little bit tough. I recommend you to go to a Sheikh Fulan. And he mentioned actually Sheikh Dr. Walid al-Mannisi of Minneapolis, Minnesota. He told him, go to Sheikh Walid. He will give you an easier fatwa on this issue that will, you know, make it easy for the students who come to you in your masjid. So this is still existing among scholars nowadays. And this is the nature of al-fiqh. Now, during the time of al-tabi'een, after the-Sahaba came what? Al-tabi'een. There were two distinguished schools. When we say schools, doesn't mean that it was like a school, a building, you know, with a principal, and that Imam was the principal of the school. They did not mean to have this school of fiqh. But their opinions and their students, when they collected their fatawa and their opinions, this is how the schools of fiqh started appearing. So in the time of the tabi'een and tabi'een, the two schools were very distinguished. The school of al-hadith, or the school of al-nas, the text, the literal text, al-zahirin, al-zahirun nas, started in al-Madinah al-Munawwarah. And the school of al-ra'i, the opinion, the logic, started in al-Iraq, specifically in al-Kufa. And why these two schools? Because of the environment at that time. Al-Madinah was the house of al-hadith. In al-Madinah, where there were the sons and the grandsons and the granddaughters of al-Sahaba and the Tabi'een living there. So the hadith was fresh. The hadith was well spread among the people. So that's why they based their opinions on al-hadith more than anything else. Why in al-Kufa? They didn't do that because very few Sahaba went to al-Kufa. And al-Iraq in general and al-Kufa in general, in particular, this is where the fabricated hadith started, wadu' al-hadith. So there was no trust in a lot of people. So Imam Abu Hanifa, who is the head, and Shaykhuhu Hammad, was also the head of this school of al-Ra'i, they were very strict when it comes to accepting or rejecting the hadith. That's why they made ijtihad, and they used their minds, their intellect, more than anyone else at that point. So this is how the two schools they started. Madrasatul Hijaz in al-Madinah, Madrasatul al-Nas, wa Madrasatul Ra'i in al-Kufa. And at that time there was known, or the 7 fuqaha of al-Madinah known: Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, Urwa ibn al-Zubayr, ibn al-Awwam, Kharijah ibn Zayd, Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad, Sulaiman ibn Yasar al-Hilali, Abu Salama ibn Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, wa Ubaydillah ibn Utbah ibn Mas'ud. These were the top scholars in al-Madinah at that time. And then after that, to go fast, came the golden age of al-fiqh. Al-Asr al-Dhahabi lil-Fiqh al-Islami. The golden age during the time of the followers of al-Tabi'een. And the followers of the Tabi'een was the time of the beginning of al-Madhhab al-Hanafi and al-Madhhab al-Maliki. Actually, some scholars, they consider Imam Abu Hanifa as one of the Tabi'een because he met one of the scholars, met one of the Sahaba. Imam Malik didn't meet the Sahaba. He came later. So the first school of fiqh was al-Madhhab al-Hanafi, established by al-Imam Abu Hanifa al-Nu'man, known as al-Imam al-A'zam, the great Imam in al-Kufa. And Abu Hanifa was, mashallah, extremely smart person. Extremely smart person, And Abu Hanifa didn't mean to establish his school. Actually, his scholars, his students who became scholars, like Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, wa Abu al-Qasim, many of them, they collected the opinions of Abu Hanifa and they started documenting them in books. This is how the Madhhab al-Hanafi started. Shortly after that, during the time of Abu Hanifa, al-Imam Malik showed up. And by the way, one of the main reasons why these madhahib started, because of the documentation of al-Hadith. Al-Hadith was not documented at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And Rasulullah ﷺ asked the Sahaba not to document al-Hadith. He said in the Hadith, لا تكتبوا عني شيئا غير القرآن ومن كتب عني شيئا غير القرآن فيمحه. Do not write from me anything except the Quran. And if anyone wrote or documented from me anything else except the Quran, wipe it down. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't want the Sahaba to mix between Quran and al-Hadith. He wanted them to focus on the Quran at the first time. And then when came the time in the Umayyah dynasty, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiyallahu anhu wa rahimahullah, at his time, he is the one who asked the first scholar, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, rahmatullahi alayh, to document al-Hadith. So the very first book of Hadith was documented by al-Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, rahimahullah. And Ibn Shihab was one of the shuyukh of al-Imam Malik in al-Madinah. He was one of his shuyukh. So the documentation of al-Hadith gave birth to the schools of fiqh. So Abu Hanifa came, and then shortly al-Imam Malik. Abu Hanifa was not the first one in al-Kufa. There were Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, some Sahaba, and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, when they migrated, when they moved to al-Kufa, they established that school. In al-Madinah, it's not Imam Malik that established that school. Abdullah ibn Umar was the one who established that school. And then some of the Sahaba came, and some of the Tabi'een came. And then Imam Malik was the very well known. So Imam Malik also, he didn't mean to establish a school of fiqh, but his students, he had a lot of students taking his knowledge, they started documenting. And his book, the very first book, Al-Muwatta of Imam Malik. Al-Muwatta is not a book of fiqh. Al-Muwatta is a book of hadith. Al-Muwatta is a book of hadith. But the hadith in Al-Muwatta are the base that Imam Malik built his fiqh opinion on. You see? And then came Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. So Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i was the student of both Imam Abu Hanifa and Malik. So his fiqh came in between. Okay? So he mixed between al-Nas, the hadith of Imam Malik, and al-Ra'i, the logic of Imam Abu Hanifa. So he was in between. And Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, he studied on Imam Malik in al-Madinah and Abu Hanifa in al-Kufa. And then he moved to Mecca, and then he moved to Baghdad, and then he moved to Egypt. And he died in Egypt. If you go to Cairo next time, go to visit Masjid al-Imam al-Shafi'i. His grave is outside the masjid, right there. Okay? So, al-Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. And who came after him? Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who lived in Baghdad. At the time of al-Kufa, at the time of Abu Hanifa, Baghdad didn't exist at that time. So Baghdad was built later on. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was the one who lived and died in Baghdad. Why these four scholars? Were they the only scholars at that time? No. You know that there were scholars more knowledgeable than them. When you talk about Imam al-Awza'i, rahmatullahi alayh, when you talk about al-Layth ibn Sa'd, when you talk about Yahya ibn Ma'in, when you talk about Imam al-Laythi, those were scholars. Some of them were more knowledgeable than the four Imams. Where's the problem? Why we don't hear about them? Why we didn't hear about their schools like we do about Abu Hanifa, Malik, al-Shafi'i, and Ahmad? Because their students did not go anywhere else. Their students, they remained in the city where their scholars lived and died, and they didn't go anywhere else. Versus the students of Imam Abu Hanifa scattered all over the world. That's why you see al-Madhhab al-Hanafi in most of Asia. This is where the students of Imam Abu Hanifa went. This is why you see al-Imam or al-Madhhab al-Maliki in North Africa, going all the way from Libya to part of Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, going down to Mauritania and Senegal and West Africa. Because this is where the students of Imam Malik left, and they settled over there, and they carried with them fiqh of Imam Malik, of their teacher, and they spread it all over the place over there. Why most of the people of Egypt are Shafi'iyah? Because this is where Imam Shafi'i ended his life, and he spread his knowledge over there. So, but the other scholars didn't have this chance, didn't have this opportunity. I would like to conclude with two stories showing the adab, the etiquette between those scholars. Again, I mentioned something earlier, and I said that we should understand the significance of the schools of fiqh. A school of fiqh doesn't mean that this is another version of Islam. This is another type of Islam. If you are not Hanafi, you are in trouble. If you are not Shafi'i, I'm not going to allow my daughter who is Maliki to marry your son who is Shafi'i or Hanbali or Hanafi. This happened in the history and still happening, unfortunately. Why? Because of our misunderstanding to the significance of the differences of fiqh. Differences of fiqh are permissible. Differences of fiqh are not differences in aqeedah. They are differences in the branches of Islam, in the minor issues of Islam. Abu Hanifa, radiyallahu anhu wa ardah wa rahimahullah, used to go make Umrah and Hajj. And every time Abu Hanifa arrives to Al-Madinah, and people start spreading, the word Abu Hanifa is in Medina. Abu Hanifa was a celebrity at that time, like one of the greatest scholars in the world. Arrived to Al-Madinah. Where is he? He's in the Masjid al-Nabawi praying. And people rushed to him. And Imam Malik was there, was alive, was the Imam of Al-Madinah. And, especially the young people, the students of knowledge, talabatul ilm, when they heard about Abu Hanifa in Al-Madinah, they used to rush to him and asking him questions. He never answered a question in Medina. He always tells people, لا يفتى ومالك بالمدينة. No one has a right to give fatwa as long as Malik is in Medina. Go and ask your scholar. Don't talk to me. Don't ask. I'm just traveling. I'm a guest here. Subhanallah. Another story about Imam Malik himself. Imam Malik was a great scholar, and he wrote his Al-Muwatta. And Harun al-Rashid, and they say Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, one of them. Harun al-Rashid contacted him and told him, Ya Malik, I'm so impressed of your Muwatta. I'm so impressed of you and your fiqh and your knowledge. And I want to make your fiqh and your opinion is the official fiqh of the entire Abbasi dynasty. Everybody has to stick with the fiqh of Imam Malik. Imagine you are Imam Malik, and the Khalifa of Islam or Muslimin comes to you to tell you this. You know what? We want to honor you because of your knowledge, and we want to make your fiqh is the official fiqh of the state. I mean, this is something great, right? What do you think was the reaction of Imam Malik? He told him, no, don't do this. Don't do this. Why? He said, because the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ scattered everywhere, traveled everywhere. And every one of them had, or carried some of portions of fiqh that others did not. So that's why they give fatwa according to their knowledge. So let people follow their local imams and their local scholars. Please don't impose my fiqh on the entire Muslim ummah. Don't do this, because this is not good. Look at this smartness and this fiqh of an Imam Malik. My brothers and sisters, we can never bring the entire ummah on one and only one fiqh opinion. We can never do this. It's not going to happen. If you think that the unity of Muslims should be according to the unity on the fiqh that they carry, you are mistaken. It will never happen. Why? Because this is the nature of life, and this is the nature of Islam. Inshallah, one day I would like to give a presentation about fiqhul ikhtilaf fil Islam and adabul ikhtilaf fil Islam, the etiquette of disagreement in Islam. Why al-fuqaha disagree? Why? I mean, some people might ask this question, why these fuqaha cannot agree on everything? Why they should disagree on everything? Because this is the nature of Islam. They cannot agree on everything. Even the Sahaba radiallahu anhum disagreed amongst each other, but the Prophet was there to correct them and to tell them what's right and what's wrong. After the Prophet no one has the right to bring the entire ummah on one fiqh opinion. It's not going to happen. Then what should we do? We should observe al-adab with one another. We should learn from our scholars the way they observed al-adab, the etiquette, the manner, the Islamic manners, the way they showed respect to one another. This is the solution. So inshallah, one day we will talk about more details, inshallah. But I wanted you tonight to understand the nature of al-fiqh, how this fiqh started at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who were fuqaha at the time of the Sahaba and the fuqaha at the time of the Tabi'een, and how the four major schools of thought were established, why other fuqaha did not have the chance to have their own schools of fiqh. This is what I wanted to share with you tonight, and I hope that this will help us understanding part of our Sharia, part of our deen, and we will continue inshallah. جزاكم الله خيرا بارك الله فيكم حفظكم الله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Speak loud, please. I can't hear. Yes. Good question. If I answer this question, I have to go past iqamah. But I'm going to answer this question soon, inshallah. This is a whole topic. This is a whole topic. And I will talk about the first level of al-mujtahideen and the second level of talabatul ilm, the student of knowledge, and the third layer of the ummah, which is the general Muslim ummah. Who are al-mujtahideen? Who are talabatul ilm? Who are the general ummah? And when it comes to al-fiqh, to these schools of fiqh, what should we do? Should we reject all of them? Should we stick with one of them only? Should we combine? I will answer this question soon, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.